Hello, everybody, and welcome to 30 and 60, where we bring you the latest news from secular humanist perspective, insightful, rational, and to the point. Let's dive in. Greetings and salutations, everybody, and welcome to our second installment of 30 and 60, which is a news show that compiles the top news, national, global, and some religious stories from the last 30 days. Later in the show, we will be speaking with co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Dan Barker, who has a new book called Contraduction. I am your host, Cynthia McDonald. And before we actually get to the stories, I just want to let you all know that Skeptic Haven is monetized. So please don't hesitate to go ahead and give to the super chats. Put in your comments. I will read our comments and super chats at the end of the show. And then also, if you would like to even support us and our endeavors more, because we have other shows other than Year 30 and 60 or Women Atheists UNLOAD that comes on Skeptic Haven, please consider being a patron. You can actually sign up to be a patron at www.patreon.com/Skeptic Haven. So with that being said, let's get to it. Let's go to our first photo. Oh, isn't that so lovely? It is the 45th President of the United States. This story actually comes from Reuters. In an ongoing case against former President Donald Trump, U.S. prosecutors are trying a cautious approach as they pursue charges related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. The Justice Department, traditionally proactive of presidential powers, is signaling limits to its broader view of the executive role. Special counsel Jack Smith argues that Trump was primarily acting as a candidate, not in his official capacity as president, when he attempted to hold onto power. Trump, who has pleaded not guilty to multiple charges, claims the case is politically motivated. The case raises broader legal questions about presidential immunity, as the Justice Department historically defended presidents in several lawsuits, including Trump. During President Biden's administration, however, this criminal case could test the boundaries of presidential power in unprecedented ways. Legal experts highlight potential conflicts between sustaining the indictment and maintaining traditional Justice Department stances on presidential immunity. The final decision on Trump's actions will likely be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, with any trial unlikely to occur before the 2024 election. Next slide, please. This story is from CNN. The Army has issued a strong rebuke of former President Donald Trump's campaign following an incident at Arlington National Cemetery on August the 26th. The Army's statement released on Thursday said participants in the event were informed about federal laws prohibiting political activities on cemetery grounds. The Army confirmed an Arlington employee attempting to enforce these rules was pushed aside by Trump's team, though no charges were pressed and the matter is still considered closed. This incident has drawn significant attention due to the sensitive nature of Arlington Cemetery, particularly Section 60, where many veterans were from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were buried. Trump was attending a wreath-laying ceremony to honor 13 U.S. service members killed in Afghanistan. The Trump campaign insists there was no wrongdoing, but the Arlington officials have emphasized that political activities are prohibited in the cemetery. Criticism has also come from veterans groups, with some expressing outrage that Trump's campaign turned a sacred space into a political backdrop. The Green Beret Foundation and Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America have both condemned the incident, urging respect for the cemetery's non-political sanctity. The Trump the Trump campaign has disputed the accusations, but has yet to release any video evidence of the altercation. Next slide, please. The story is from The Hill. A Democratic political action PAC, Swing Left, has launched a new platform called the Immediate Impact Fund to streamline small dollar donations to campaigns in need. This fund connects grassroots donors to Democratic candidates in competitive races, helping to simplify donations decisions and reduce the overwhelmed many donors feel. Swing Left executive producer Yasmin Raji says the fund will be updated weekly until Election Day, focusing on key races where support is crucial for securing Democrat majorities at federal and state levels. The platform uses various data points, including election returns and current polling, to determine which campaigns need the most help. In its first round, the fund is supporting several candidates, including Senator John Tester of Montana Representative, Ruben Gallego of Arizona, and Democrat challengers in key House races. The PAC's efforts aim to provide direct contributions to campaigns, bypassing the administrative burden often associated with small dollar donations. Swing Left has raised $15 million so far for Democrat candidates in 2024 and engages 1 million volunteers nationwide. Next slide. This story is from CNN. A mass shooting at Allahatchie High School in Winder, Georgia, left 4 people dead and 9 others injured. The victims include 2 students, Mason Schermerhorn and Kristen Angulo, both 14, and 2 teachers, Richard Aspawal and Christine Ermy. The suspect, Colt Gray, a 14-year-old student, is in custody and will be charged as an adult. Gray has been questioned last year over online threats, but was not arrested at the time. The shooting began during an Algebra 1 class and was carried out using an AR-15 style rifle. The school and others in the district were immediately placed on knockdown. The FBI and the ATF are investigating, though no other schools were attacked, and the investigation is ongoing. Classes are canceled for the week as the community grapples with this tragedy. This actually goes to another story concerning school shootings and their statistics since 2024 has begun. This is from CBS News. By early September 2024, the U.S. has already seen over 200 school shootings, ranging from school shootings from gang violence and domestic disputes to accidents. This alarming number highlights the ongoing issue of gun violence in schools, with Georgia experiencing 10 such incidents this year alone. The incidents span from minor altercations to tragic events like the one in Winder. School shootings have been on the rise over the past decade. As of 2024, the numbers have escalated, surpassing previous years, with 218 school shootings recorded in early September. The events are not just limited to mass shootings. Many involve single victims or property damage. Of the 46 people killed in school shootings in 2024, 18 were under the age of 18. While mass shooting incidents often dominate headlines, smaller scale shootings also contribute significantly to the overall toll on students and staff. Notably, 75% of deaths and 68% of injuries in school shootings are from non-mass shootings, which tend to receive less media attention. Over these shootings, around 51% occurred during school hours, often making them deadlier due to pressure of more potential victims. Shootings during extracurricular activities such as sports games also contribute to the overall figures as seen in 2023. Incident in New Jersey where 10-year-old was killed during a football game. While the 1999 Columbine High School shooting shocked the nation and led to a wave of active shooter drills in public schools, gun violence in educational settings have continued unabated. The 2022 Uvalde shooting, which claimed the lives of 19 children and 2 teachers, served as another stark reminder of the dangerous reality faced by students and educators alike. Despite increased security measures and frequent active shooter drills, the number of school shootings continues to grow. The data from 2024 suggests that more comprehensive solutions, such as addressing gun access and mental health support, may be necessary to curb this persistent crisis. Now, in world news, this story is from Time Magazine. On September 1st, 2024, the discovery of 6 Israeli hostages killed in Gaza sparked widespread outrage across Israel. The victims, Hirsch Goldberg Polin, Eden Yerushalmi, Ori Danimo, Amlong, M. Almang Surasi, Alex Labanov, and Carmel Gat were found dead from multiple gunshot wounds, allegedly executed hours before the bodies were discovered. The backlash against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been intense, with protesters labeling him as a murderer. Demonstrations erupted nationwide, with estimates suggesting 500,000 people took to the streets. Critics accused Netanyahu of failing to negotiate a ceasefire that could have saved the hostages, citing his prioritization of military objectives over their release. The public anger has led to massive protests, including a general strike declared by the Histadrut Union. Demonstrators in cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem have voiced their frustrations through symbolic actions, such as carrying coffins and blocking highways. Netanyahu has defended his actions, stating the negotiations were ongoing and that his priority was to secure Israeli strategic interest. Despite this, the sentiment among many Israelis is that Netanyahu's decision contributed to hostages' death. The situation underscores a deep societal divide in Israel between those advocating for continued military action and those demanding a focus on rescuing captives. The protest highlights a growing disillusionment with the government handling of the hostage crisis and the border conflict with Hamas. Next slide, please. This story is also from CNN. A prospective deal between Israel and Hamas is reported 90% complete, according to senior U.S. official. The agreement aims to end nearly a year of conflict and has gained urgency following the killing of 6 hostages by Hamas. Key issues still to be resolved include the exchange of prisoners and the redeployment of Israeli forces in Gaza. Excuse me. U.S. officials, along with Qatar and Egypt, have been negotiating for months. The current proposal involves releasing around 800 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the remaining hostages, including American citizens. The deal also includes provisions for significant humanitarian aid to Gaza, such as 600 aid trucks daily and infrastructure support. Despite progress, disputes over specific terms, especially Israel's control of the Philadelphia corridor and the extent of Israeli military withdrawal has hindered finalization. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recite recent statements on the corridor have complicated negotiations. U.S. officials stress that the broad deal remains most viable option despite ongoing frustrations and calls for some American hostage families for separate agreements. Next slide, please. This story is from The Guardian. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected a 5-day ceasefire proposal by Hamas for the release of his hostages held in Gaza. The deal was put forward shortly after Hamas' significant attack on Israel on October 7th, which resulted in over 1,400 deaths. Netanyahu's office declined to comment, and his stance has remained firm even after the subsequent ground offensive launched on October 27th. Initial negotiations included a proposal for a ceasefire in exchange for releasing women, children, and elderly. However, Netanyahu's government refused continuing aggressive military operations. Public pressure on the Israeli government to prioritize hostage negotiations has intensified, with families of the captives protesting outside Netanyahu's residence. The ongoing conflict has resulted in significant casualties and damage, with over 10,300 people killed in Gaza and more than 25,000 injured. Despite a series of humanitarian pauses and discussions on a possible short-term ceasefire, no comprehensive agreement has been reached. Negotiations continue, with discussions focusing on the release of hostages, the flow of humanitarian aid, and the terms for any potential ceasefire. Next slide, please. The story is from CNN. Pavel Durov, the founder of Telegram, is under intense scrutiny following allegations of violence against his child. French prosecutors have requested more information from Switzerland. Agreed Irina Bolgar, Durov's former partner, filed a complaint alleging that Durov harmed their youngest son multiple times between 2021 and 2022. The complaint details instances of physical violence and threats, including a claim that Durov threatened to kill the child. Durov was arrested in Paris on September 1st, 2024, on charges related to Telegram's moderation issues, particularly its use by extremist groups. He was released on bail and remains in France under judicial supervision. The French arrest has ignited a debate over freedom of speech, as Telegram is a popular tool for both Russia and the Ukraine. Bolgar's complaint also highlights a financial dispute, claiming Durov stopped supporting his children financially after their separation in 2018. Bolgar initially avoided publicizing these issues, but chose to do so after her children inquired about their father's online presence. The case has sparked significant media attention and political debate, with French President Emmanuel Macron defending the French judiciary independence and his decision to grant Durov citizenship in 2021. Now we're going to go ahead and take a break from the news here so that we can go ahead and bring on our special guest. But before we do, I just want to tell you a little bit about a person that I know, Mr. Dan Barker, who is a former preacher and is also the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, co-host of Free Thought Radio, and the co-founder of the Clergy Project. After 19 years as an evangelical minister, Dan saw the light and announced his atheism in 1984. His first public appearance as an atheist was on Oprah Winfrey's AM Chicago. He travels extensively, lecturing and performing on college campuses, and has participated in more than 100 public debates. A former composer of Christian music, for which he still receives royalties, Dan is now a jazz pianist and writer of free thought music, including the albums Beware of Dogma and Adrift on a Star. He is the founder and executive producer of the Godless Gospel Project, and Dan has authored over 13 books, including Godless, The Good Atheist, and Losing Faith in Faith, to name a few. Here he is to speak on his latest book, Contraduction. Please welcome to Skeptic Haven, Mr. Dan Barker. Hey, Dan,
Hello, Cynthia.
how
Hey,
you doing?
good to see you again.
It's great to see you too, Dan. It is such a pleasure to have you on Skeptic Haven. Welcome to our little channel. I appreciate you agreeing to
Wow,
come
that's amazing.
on.
Have you
Yes.
read all those books behind you?
I'm endeavoring to through
Yeah.
osmosis. But
Yeah,
speaking, go
you were
ahead.
great, Cynthia, in the Godless Gospel when you took over that preacher role. Um, I don't know if your viewers know that you're one of the singers and the vocal director in the group.
Oh, well, they do now.
Oh, they do that.
They do now. Yeah, Scotland's Gospel is a lot of fun, guys. Just even before we actually go into talking to Contraduction, I'll just give like a little background on how I met Dan and got involved with Godless Gospel. So I met Dan in 2021 at a Women of Color Beyond Belief conference that was hosted by the Black Atheists with Mandisa Thomas. Shout out to Mandisa. I believe that she's in the chat. And that's when you all told me about the project, and I was really intrigued, and encouraged me to audition. And it's kind of funny because of the audition video that I sent along was me singing like a gospel song, like Christian gospel song. But that was previous to my seeing the light myself. And then you guys invited me to come along, and I was ever so grateful because we've been having like a great time with performing and also doing some recording, and I can't wait to get back into it. But since you brought it up, and before we actually get into Contraduction, won't you tell us a little bit about how you even conceived Godless Gospel?
Well, this goes back many years. It goes back to the late 80s. I left the ministry in 84, but I didn't leave the music. I just loved, well, some of the church music I love. Some of it was kind of boring, but you know what I mean. And especially gospel music and all of that. And so I wrote a couple of gospel songs in a quote unquote gospel style, including "I Don't Need Jesus" and "Life Is Good." And over the years, I've been playing those songs. I play the piano and I perform and I, give presentations. And it's been fun to perform the songs, but I've never been able to do it right. I've always thought this should really be done with a good group of gospel singers and gospel musicians, and I'm pretty good on the piano. But so a few years ago, I was thinking, well, why don't we try to find how in the world are we going to find some gospel singers who will sing godless gospel? And so that's where Mandisa came in. Mandisa Thomas, the president of Black Nonbelievers. And so Mandisa said, well, let me look around. And Mandisa found some people. She found Andre Forbes, our musical director, who was a former gospel songwriter, producer, pianist, who also saw the light and is now an atheist. And he found some others. And well, you know the story. We looked around and we auditioned and we finally put the thing together. And any of you viewers who have not seen it, you should look at the most recent one that we did in here in Madison, Wisconsin, where during the song "I Don't Need Jesus," Cynthia goes into her preacher mode. I mean, like, that was totally a total surprise. I knew it was going to be good, but I didn't know it was going to be that much fun. do you need Jesus to have love? Do you need Jesus to have peace? Hell no.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah, listen, well, I hope we can do it a few more times.
Yeah, I hope so too. I know that, like, eventually that we're going to get back into, getting the album together, but until then, we are living on the internet, people. So when you get a chance, go ahead and check it out under the Freedom from Religion Foundation's channel on YouTube. Okay, so now that we kind of talked a little bit about Godless Gospel, let's talk a bit more about your newest and latest book, Contraduction. So, how did the idea of this book come about?
Well, so as you can probably tell, contraduction is a new word. It's not a typo. I know the I and the U are next to each other on the keyboard, but it's not contradiction, it's contraduction.
Mhm.
And I do a lot of debates. I've done 140 public, formal, moderated debates before an audience since 1985. And I really love that. Next to music, I love doing debates. And in 2022, I did a debate in Florida, and my opponent was arguing for the fine tuning argument for the existence of God,
Good boy.
which most of us agree, and even Christopher Hitchens and Steven Weinberg, we agree that the fine tuning argument, as bad as it is their best shot. If theists are going to argue for God, if they want to really put out their best, the fine tuning argument and morality also is right up there. And so my opponent said, the fine tuning argument shows that all the initial constants and parameters of the universe have to be within this extremely narrow range. If any one of them was off by even the slightest amount, then life would not exist and we wouldn't even be here having a debate. And he said, so we can conclude using abductive reasoning that the best explanation for life for the universe is a supreme being, a intelligent designer.
Mhm.
So I was getting up to give my opening statement, and I'm thinking abduction. I remember that word. I know deduction and induction, right? Deductive and inductive, and it it just hit me as I was standing up there in the, I was going to say pulpit, in the podium. uh,
Hard to let
I,
it go. I know, Dan.
I spent a lot of years in the pulpit,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and I thought abduction is like the weakest kind of reasoning you can use. It's valid. It's kind of what investigators use to try to come up with a prime suspect. So it doesn't get you proof. Abduction is really just an inference to the best explanation. You know, you have all these possible explanations, so you're going to pick the one that seems the best. And so he said, abduction, leads us to conclude that the best explanation for the universe is a God.
Mm,
And it hit me. Abduction doesn't get you anywhere if you're pointed in the wrong direction. If your
mm.
argument is backward and reversed, then it's not going to go anywhere. And of doing these debates over the years, I've been thinking about that. A lot of our thinking is actually flipped around backwards, and we don't know it is.
Mm.
And during the debate, I said, we need a new word. We need a word like postduction. Well, it turns out that was a bad word. It was a bad. I was just thinking on my feet.
Right.
Um, and so a couple months later, it dawned on me, no, I don't need a prefix that means after. I need a prefix that means reversed. So contraduction. And that word was born. It's a brand new word in philosophy.
Hmm.
And contraduction is basically when you do get it totally backwards. For example, have you ever been sitting on a train that's not moving, and then the train next to you starts to move, and you briefly think it's you that's moving? You got it totally backwards because we tend to view the world from the human point of view. Everything's from our point of view. So, or like we call it a sunrise. The sun actually not rising. It's we who are rising, but from our point of view, we flipped it around totally. We've contraduced in our brains that it's the totally backward way of doing it. Well, I realize there's a whole bunch of areas in life where we do contraduce things without knowing it. And if you do come up with a premise that's based on backward thinking, then your whole argument is bad. And then the whole fine tuning argument itself turns out to be just a bad argument. You don't even have to defeat it. You don't
Mm.
even have to argue against it because it just disappears. When you flip it around, you realize, oh, well, never mind. There's no problem here.
Is that almost like an argument from incredulity? If because like it's almost saying that well, because we don't have any other better explanation, it has to be this. Would that be the same thing or no?
Well, abduction, you're right. If you're talking about abduction, we don't know what the answer is, and so we're going to pick one. And how convenient that the supreme being happens to be the one of your religion that you were born into. So I think you're right when it comes to abduction. Contraduction is not out of ignorance. Contraduction is where you're actually viewing the world. You're actually seeing things. You're looking at the evidence, but it's flipped around, and you don't even know it's flipped around, because if you're looking at it from your point of view rather than externally from another point of view.
Does that only concern religion, or could that be utilized in other areas as well?
Yeah, so in principle, the word contradiction in philosophy can be used for position, causality. Um, so, like in causality, cause and effect, I remember hearing that there's a correlation between smoking and depression.
Hmm.
Scientists have discovered that there's a correlation. And when I heard that, I immediately thought, well, then if you stop smoking, you'll be less depressed. That smoking causes depression, right? But when Annie Laurie, my wife, heard that, she thought, no, it's the other way around. It's if you're depressed, you're going to smoke to self-medicate to help you. So,
Mhm.
so which way is the causality to go? And so I don't have to answer that question except to point out that whichever way it goes, the other way is contradictory. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's a reversal. It turns out we were both right. It turns out that in the short run, there's been some studies. In the short run, actually, smoking does help alleviate depression. But in the long run, if you smoke for years, it actually increases the risk of depression. So stopping smoking could. But in any event, that's one example. Another example is in that book, The Killers of the Flower Moon by David Gran. Uh, there's a photograph of a homeowner, a woman homeowner, and her servant. And this white woman is standing by the door of this summer retreat. And there's this dark Osage Indian woman sitting next to her. Many viewers of that photo would assume that the white woman is the homeowner and that the dark Osage woman, the dark skinned woman, is the servant. But it was actually the other way around. It's contradictive. Actually,
Mm.
that Osage woman had become wealthy from oil rights there in that area. You saw that movie, The Killers of the Flower Moon,
Mhm.
and that the Osage woman had hired the white woman as a servant. But in our
Mm.
brains, when you look at it from one point of view, you're just automatically assume the reverse, right?
Mhm.
So there's a
Mhm.
lot of areas in life where um, we assume it's one way because of either our biases or maybe because of their stature or their skin color or whatever. We just make a wrong guess. And in my book, I give many different examples that are not necessarily anything to do with religion, but you can apply that to the arguments for religion, like the design argument or the Kalam cosmological argument as
Oh
well. You
no,
can.
don't say that, because every time someone says Kalam cosmological argument, I might like melt like the wicked witch of the
Ah,
west.
all right. I retract my statement. The jury will disregard those remarks.
Continue, please.
No, I was just saying. So if you, and it's an innocent thing that happens to all of us. It's not like some devious thing. We just don't know that we're getting it backwards. And if you don't know, you're trying to explain things, and that's what happened with Ptolemy in the second century.
Mhm.
Um, the Ptolemaic solar system. He was looking at the sun rising and assuming that the Earth is the center of everything and the Earth is stationary. He came up with this really weird Rube Goldberg machine explanation for how these spheres within spheres and how the motion of the planets and the retrograde. He came up with this strange, it's called the Ptolemaic solar system, trying to explain all of this that he was observing, not knowing that it was totally flipped. And if he would have realized that, of course, it's not the sun that's rising, it's the earth that's spinning, that whole thing would have evaporated. The whole argument would have just gone away, and he wouldn't have had to tie himself into knots. And I think a lot of, it's not just theists, but a lot of other philosophers in that, I think, on the free will debate as well, tie ourselves into these philosophical knots, trying to explain and understand. And so I came up with the word Waldo.
Yeah,
Well, I
what
didn't
is
invent the
Waldo?
I
What is
didn't invent the word Waldo. I mean, it's been used.
hmm
Um, a Waldo is an unnecessarily complex, overly convoluted explanation that's, like the Ptolemaic solar system. It comes from a 1942 book by the science fiction writer Robert Heinlein.
hmm
The short story is called Waldo, and Waldo was this little weakling of a man, a little tiny weakling of a man, but he was intellectually brilliant. So he built this machine, this huge machine, the pantographic, that made him like really powerful. So it's like manipulating from a distance. So I'm using the word Waldo to refer to any of these explanations, and like the whole idea of a soul, the whole idea of spirits, and the whole idea, these are Waldos. They're unnecessarily complicated attempts to explain reality when we got everything backwards.
It kind of reminds me of when you have like those particular atheist call-in shows. We've seen them all, and you may have like a theist call in who would go into some convoluted reasoning to give evidence of an existence of a God, like a supernatural being. And it gets to the point where they may say something that sounds like so profound and so and just and so mind blowing, but it's really like a Waldo, or another word I heard it called was a deepity. Something
Yeah,
that's, yeah, sounds profound and mind explosive, but it really is not.
yeah. Daniel Dennett came up with that word,
Yeah,
or I
I
think I think it was his daughter who came up with the word deepity.
with the
But
deepity. Yeah, ever
yeah,
since I heard that word deepity, I was just thinking, I'm just about to out myself, how I used to do that a lot as a theist, and sometimes would pair like my thoughts and things of that nature with scripture, and then in the audience people would go like I said something like really profound,
whoa.
right? But then when I think about it, I'm like, that wasn't profound at all. It was kind of stupid.
Yeah, but coming at it from their point of view, they're sitting in church because they've already bought into this paradigm. They're already
Mhm.
seeing things backward. They think life comes into the body, right? They like in the Bible it says we have this treasure in earthen vessels, right? But that's totally backwards. Life isn't something that is inserted into the body like a soul from the outside. Life is something that emanates out of the body. It's the other way around. So there's a contradiction
Yeah.
as well.
Oh
So when
wow.
you come to the fine tuning argument, that look at how the constants of the universe were perfectly fine tuned for life, it's kind of like the person who says, look at how all those rivers were made to flow right along the state border.
Mm.
How did they do that? How did they get those rivers to divert? I mean, it must have been a huge, expensive civic undertaking. I mean, just think about it, what it would take to intelligently fine tune the rivers to fit those borders. Well, that's silly, right? Because the rivers came first and the borders came later.
Right.
And so uh, Victor Stenger, he died about 10 years ago, but we were pretty good friends. Victor Stenger, the astrophysicist, wrote a book called The Fallacy of Fine Tuning, where he said basically the same thing. The universe was not fine tuned for us. We were fine tuned for the universe. You see the contradiction? Instead of thinking that all of this reality of everything was aiming to us, when it's the other way around, we as evolved animals have to fit the nature that we're in. So
hmm
we were fine tuned for the universe. So that flips the whole fine tuning argument around, and it removes the premise, one of the premises in the argument, which means it's not a sound argument. It's bad logic.
Yeah, it would make sense. I mean, because like there's this whole idea, which is like what the survival of the fittest, which basically means that you have to adapt into your environment in order for you to survive in it. And that's kind of just like where we would, as far as like human beings concerned, like how we even evolved in our enclaves, like from family units to villages to cities to things of that nature, in order for us to be able to survive in our environment and also for us to thrive. You know, if we don't necessarily, if we're not able to adapt, then we're not going to make it. So I always felt that that fine tuning argument, especially when I saw the light, was kind of silly because like it didn't make sense to me that, you know, a god, a supernatural being would try to create a universe to serve us when there's so many things that can kill us.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and and if we don't adapt to what's basically around us, we're kind of like, right?
yeah.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to start using the word contradiction more, especially since you're giving us a great dissertation about how to use it.
Mm.
But I wanted to ask you, there's a particular chapter in your book called reflection. So what's that chapter all about?
Oh, so reflection is one of these non-theological examples of contradiction, where when we look in a mirror, it's about mirrors, and there's a picture in there of the hand up at the mirror, and you can see the back of the hand, but in the mirror you see the front of the hand. A lot of people think the mirror reverses left and right, but it doesn't. It doesn't. We think it does because we think we're looking at another person looking back at us. If your right hand is to the east, well, the right hand in the mirror is still to the east, right? If your left hand's to the west, what the mirror actually does is it doesn't reverse left and right. It reverses front to back. If you point at yourself, it looks like you're pointing the other way. It's what a mirror is actually doing. And so contradiction comes in where we realize that we think we're looking backward at ourselves when actually if you were to pick up a piece of paper that had your picture on it, right, and look at it, you would see it like anyone else would see it with the right and left flipped. They wouldn't correspond.
Mm-hmm.
But if you turn the paper around and hold it up to the light, then you'll see it where you do correspond left and right. And so if you look at a mirror, instead of thinking that this person in the mirror is looking back at you, think of the person in the mirror as looking with you, away from you, forward. It's not staring back at you. The light, the path that the light would have traveled if the mirror hadn't blocked it. So I set up that chapter. And by the way, have you ever noticed why doesn't, if the mirror reverses left and right or front and back, why does it never reverse top to bottom? Why does that never happen? Even if you're laying on your side, still top to bottom. Why is that? And well, there's a good reason. I go into all of that, and it has to do with the way our brains, from our point of view, look at things. And then I use that chapter as groundwork for later chapters, like the chapter on free will, for example, using it as an analogy. But it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of fun illustrations in it. And the book has been endorsed by Steven Pinker, by the great British philosopher A.C. Granling. He said he read it in one day. By and he's recommending the book. By Andrienne, Carl Sagan's wife, widow. She really liked it. Ron Reagan, the son of President Ronald Reagan. Robert Sapolsky, the author of Behave and Determined. Michael Shermer, and many other people. Kate Cohen, who's the Washington Post columnist, she said, "This book made me laugh. I really like it." So I'm pretty. It's pretty fun when good thinkers that you admire read your work and really enjoy reading it. So
yeah, I actually, it's on my way to my house as we speak. So I'm really looking forward to reading it. And then also too, I think that, didn't you have like some other contributors that gave to the book as well?
well, it's yeah. You mean other endorsements? Yeah, and there's also, I acknowledged, like more than 40 names of people who read the book and gave comments and really helped a lot. But
Nice.
well, Mandisa Thomas is one of the people, and then David Tamayo of Hispanic American Freethinkers, and Bailey Harris. If you know Bailey Harris, she's the child author of the children's book about humanism, and Well, and Ed Buckner and a number of, and it's a short book. Look, it's just a little tiny short book.
So you
You get
can read it in one day. Did and I think that you mentioned there was some artwork that's also in the book as well, and you had a contributor to
there
that.
is. I found an artist, a friend of mine now, Marcos Telias from Santiago, Chile, and we've
Mm,
become good friends. He's a doctor and he's a wonderful artist. And he agreed. He drew all these nice little pictures in the book, which lightens it up so that it doesn't look like some big, heavy, gray philosophy book. It's just really a lot of fun.
nice.
And he didn't want to be paid. He says, "I just want to do this, and just send me a dozen copies." So I did that. I sent him a dozen copies too. And I was down there in Argentina, Uruguay, and Santiago just a couple of months ago, where I gave
Nice.
a talk about this in Spanish. That was fun to think of
Oh,
all those philosophical words in Spanish.
that is so cool. We're not even going to talk about my very broken Spanish that I, sometimes try to flex when I go on the cruises that I do with Black non-believers every year.
Oh.
But is there anything else that you want to tell our audience and other people that happen to be watching about the book and give them a little bit more of bait to go ahead and get it?
I was going to subtitle the book. It
Okay.
was going to be Contradiction, the Death of the Design Argument.
Hmm.
But the publisher thought that would limit the book and limit the book's appeal because it's more than just the design argument. It really
Mhm.
is. There's just a couple of chapters on the design argument. But I think if anyone's interested in philosophy and when people do bring up the design argument, uh, this is a good way. Using contradiction is sort of a good hook to pointing out how there are errors in the premises in the design argument. There's a lot of them. And I have a
Mhm.
whole chapter on design. So if you're interested in that kind of debate or dialogue, and we don't have to be confrontational, it's not that we're going out and knocking on doors or barging into churches to try to convert people, but they
Right.
come to us.
Yeah.
They come to us and say, "You're an atheist. Well, have you thought about the design, the human eye, and the design in the universe? And how
Oh
could..."
yeah.
So you hear that a lot. So
Yeah.
this book can be one useful tool in your arsenal if you're so inclined to want to debate with those types of theists and apologists.
Indeed. So, everybody who's host of call-in shows, I'm going to even recommend everybody who happens to be on the ACA shows get Dan's book pronto. And speaking of Dan, how can people actually purchase the book?
Well, you can get it from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That's FFRF.org. And I donated 90 copies. So everything goes to, all of the sales go right to the foundation.
Mm,
FFRF.org/shop, or your other favorite online Barnes. I like Barnes and Noble, but some people like Amazon, but wherever you can find it. It's published by Hypatia Press, which is a relatively new publisher specializing in free thinking, skeptical, humanist, atheist literature.
Oh, dear. That's cool. Dope. This may need to be talking to Hypatia more often. Well, guys, you heard it here first. Dan was ever so inclined and kind enough to come grace us with his presence and talk about contradiction and other different things. Listen, guys, as we all, I like to call them for that does such great work helping keeping government out of government and religion separate, and and all that other great jazz. I know that even you guys got like some suits that to answer some of the things that are happening in schools, like what's happening in Louisiana with the Ten Commandments, and I
Yeah.
believe are you all involved with what's a cease and desist from Superintendent Walters with the Bible in every classroom?
We are
Okay.
and on many fronts. We were involved
Hmm.
also with that charter school issue that happened there. But
Oh
Walt,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
They wanted to give taxpayer money to fund a charter school that's going to be ran by the Catholic Church.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's
we're
not.
on it. Our lawyers are on that whole thing, and
Mhm.
Uh, Fortunately, the Attorney General of the state, who's a Republican, is on our side on this, which is really
Oh,
nice. He,
wait,
he, think,
wow.
he thinks religious freedom should be religious freedom, and the state should not be butting into people's private. And there are some really good Christians who they get it. They understand
Mhm.
that if your faith has to be forced with the power of government, then it's a weak faith. You should
Right.
be able to. You probably preach this. You should the love and the it should be attractive on its own merits without having to beg the state for the for tax dollars or
Right.
for tax and you know. And often in these parades we march in, there's Christians marching with us, so they're not all Christian nationalist right wing nuts. I mean, a lot of them really do understand it. So
Hmm.
he's
You
one
would
of them.
think. So that's wonderful. And I just want to tell you and keep encouraging you to fight the good fight. And thank you so much again. And I can't wait to see you again. I can't wait to work with you again. And I can't wait to read Contraduction. And everybody that's out there right now, I'm not about to do Oprah. Just go get the book. Go go to ffrf.org and order it there. You can order it from, if you want to order it from Amazon, you can. If order from Barnes and Nobles. But whatever you do, get the book. It is fully endorsed by the Skeptic Haven channel. How about that? Right? Is that great?
Oh, that's great.
Well, thank you again, Dan, for coming, and we will be seeing you again. By the by.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Well, guys, that was so much fun. I really do enjoy speaking to other people about the work that they do, and I love talking to Dan. Dan has such a wonderful, keen mind, especially when it comes to free thought matters. To all, not only saying that that is a television show that him and Annie Laurie actually do every week, but it's really cool that he actually came to speak to us. So thank you again, Mr. Dan Barker. Um, Now, guys, we're going to go ahead and just wrap up the show. And I wanted to wrap up the show with this segment called Skeptical Thought, my final skeptical thought. And I'm basing this on an article that was written and published in the August September 2024 issue of Free Thought, a Free Inquiry. So if we can go ahead and just put up that photo, please. Thank you. Is it possible to kind of just adjust my so that we can be a little bit more side by side? I would appreciate it. But in this final segment, in the August September 2024 issue of Free Inquiry, Robin Blumder's editorial Secular Humanism and the Colorblind Society advocates for a colorblind society, a concept that was well meaning and is fundamentally flawed and counterproductive. Robin E. Blumner is the CEO of the Center for Inquiry and the executive director of the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. Blumner asserts colorblindness used to be the aspiration of nearly everyone who supported the civil rights movement. This statement oversimplifies the civil rights struggle. Colorblindness, as Blumner envisions it, seeks to erase the lived experiences of Black people and other racial minorities under the guise of equality. True equality requires recognizing and addressing the unique challenges faced by these groups, not ignoring them. Blumner also criticizes the identitarian left for making skin color an essential qualification or disqualification for life's rewards without providing concrete examples. This critique is flawed and it overlooks the systemic context that necessitates the discussions. Movements like the Black Panther Party and the Nation of Islam, which Blumner labels as segregationist and Black supremacist, were responses to severe racial injustice, including violence and systemic disenfranchisement. These groups sought empowerment and self defense against a backdrop of systemic racism, not the marginalization of white individuals. She further argues that most white people in the United States these days are not racist, suggesting that historical racism is no longer a significant issue. This view ignores ongoing systemic discrimination and the actions of powerful individuals and institutions that perpetrate racism. For instance, current political campaigns often use critical race theory and wokeness as dog whistles against marginalized communities, highlighting that racism is still a pressing issue. Blumner also targets Ibram X. Kendi's approach, saying the only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. She misinterprets Kendi's argument, which is that proactive measures are necessary to counterbalance systemic inequalities. Kendi's stances is not about creating new forms of discrimination, but about addressing historic and ongoing disadvantages through corrective policies such as affirmative action. Blumner dismisses affirmative action by claiming it stokes racial and ethnic resentments and that Black Americans reject it. However, she overlooks that many Black Americans support affirmative action as a means to address systemic disadvantages. Her claim that nearly 7 in 10 Americans thought U.S. Supreme Court's rulings curtailing affirmative action in college admissions was mostly a good thing is misleading. This Gallup poll doesn't account for the nuanced support of affirmative action among Black communities or the complexities involved in the admissions process. Moreover, Blumner's assertion that we must have and we have made stunning progress shifting all those attitudes within my lifetime fails to address the persistent disparities in wealth, education, and criminal justice. For instance, the median wealth of Black families remains significantly lower than white families, and discriminatory practices like redlining continues to affect Black communities. The notion of colorblindness, as Blumner presents it, is superficial and an approach to addressing the deep-rooted issues of racial inequality. True progress requires acknowledging and tackling systemic barriers, not pretending they don't exist. Secular humanism should champion justice by embracing diversity, recognizing historical and ongoing injustices, and working towards a more equitable society. To create meaningful change, we must address these disparities directly and support policies that promote fairness and inclusion. Humanism should amplify those voices and challenge systemic oppression and advocate for a world where every individual has equal opportunities to succeed. And that is my final skeptical thought. Guys, we just want to go ahead and just thank you so much for tuning in. And as promised, I did say that if you gave to the channel, I will read your comments at the end and also give you a thanks. First, we're going to go ahead and read the Black Non-Believers. Shout out to Mandisa Thomas, who has given $9.99 to the cause. Thank you, Miss Madam President. We also have $4.99 pounds, rather, from Paul Camish, who says, say hi to Dan for me. Hi, Dan. And I remember watching him on Oprah in '84 in the UK. I was 18 at the time. Paul also gave another $4.99 in pounds, asking, can you let Dan know Robin was 16, 2 years younger than me? She keeps reminding how young she is. Very good. Oh my gosh. And we have like some other honorable mentions, I think from Sean Donahue. Wow, love your talks, Dan Barker. My wife is Roman Catholic raised and can't even imagine not being so. She's very fearful, and I am a non-believer, raised Catholic, attend church cause only for her. And then we also have Neil, the 604 Atheist. Shout out to Neil. Come hang out with us tonight on another episode of Bricks Beyond Belief. So you guys go ahead and get over to Mr. Neil 604 the Atheist. Also happens to be a contributor to Skeptic Haven and a very good friend of mine. And if you all want more information about the book Contraduction, please go to the Freedom from Religion Foundation's website at ffrf.org. Remember, you can also purchase the book by going to ffrg.org/shop. so that you can go ahead and give it to them. And then we got some other things that we are mentioning today, guys. We are looking for volunteers for producing, booking, and call screening. If you are interested, please contact us at skeptichaven@gmail.com. We also have a way for you to support us. But before we do, let's can we back up just a little bit, because that was just going too fast for me to read everybody's name. Thank you, patrons. Carl Hamish, Karen Butcher, Puck, Helen Green, Logan Fisher, Amanda McLeod, Eric Ozols, Ryan Deneen Murphy, Dan D, Michael Wiseman, Sunny Shell, Aaron Colson, and Phil Calderon. And if you guys like to become a patron and support the work that we do here at Skeptic Haven, please go to www.patreon.com/Skeptic Haven. Well, guys, that's one more thing. If this is not the only show that's on Skeptic Haven, we have other shows too. Mondays, every other Monday, is the Black Free Thinkers. Thursdays is the Sunny Spot. Saturdays, the Global Atheists, and Women Atheists Unload. And Let's Talk on Sunday. So please, guys, what you can do to make sure that you are knowing when everything is on is to like this video, subscribe to Skeptic Haven, and hit the bell, ding, 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 for notifications, so that every time that we go live or upload a video, you will be notified that we have new content to show you. And guys, we just thank you for a lively chat. Thank you for the discussion that was going on in the chat. It was really cool. I would love to know also what you all are thinking. So if you want to comment on all the stories, we do have links to every story that I talked about today in the show notes below. Please comment. Tell us what you think. What is on your mind? And if there's something else that you would love to see on 30 and 60, authors, activists, and other people that you would love to see interviewed, holler at us and let us know. Until then, guys, it's been wonderful seeing you. And this is 30 and 60, the Saturday show. We'll see you next time. Have a good rest of your day.